Hi, I'm Savannah with the Mindset Group at Pine and Beckett Realtors, and today I'm here with Chris Beckett, Stacy Bridges, and Leigh-Anne Price, and they're going to talk to us about financing.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, one of the things that has come up quite a bit here lately is getting offers accepted, as well as people who are needing some creative strategy in the middle of closing, whether that's on the buyer's or the seller's side. So today we're going to talk about seller concessions and the expectation there. Sellers get a little anxious when they're on the market longer, but if a buyer doesn't have enough money to come to the closing table, maybe if the seller could be flexible in the transaction. So one of the things that we put together today was a document that talks about what that means. What exactly does it mean for the seller to pay closing costs and seller concessions? In an FHA transaction, the seller can pay up to 6% of the sales price. That is after the borrower meets their 3.5% down payment that is required. And then conventional, the seller can pay up to 3% as long as the buyer meets their down payment. And that starts at 3% and it goes all the way up. So closing costs, what does that mean? What's included in the closing costs? Some of the things that a closing cost might include are lender fees or origination fees, appraisal management fees, lender's title policy, a survey, legal and miscellaneous fees that might come from recording or from the title company, rate buy down, that's also displayed as a discount point to get a lower rate. Some of the seller concessions can go towards buying down that rate. Property taxes, insurance, and then daily interest charges. So in this scenario, we built an FHA example, and we're going to show this on the screen, and I'm just going to go through it, but just to make it simple. Cool? So on a $200,000 purchase price based on an FHA scenario, the total 6% seller concessions can be up to $12,000. The borrower's down payment in this scenario at 3.5% is $7,000. The borrower gives $2,000 in earnest money. That means that the borrower has $5,000 left to contribute to that transaction. And then once closing costs and the remainder of the down payment is all added up, the balance of those things comes out in this scenario to $15,140. Okay? The seller in this scenario can give up to $10,140. So they can't go all the way up to the 6%. They can, which is $12,000. The max the seller can give is the $10,140. That leaves the buyer bringing $5,000 left to closing, and they meet their $7,000 requirement. So those are just some things in regards to a transaction where a seller might need to be a little bit more aggressive to get the house off the market. One of the strategies that we do see a little bit is if your agent, who is seasoned enough to know that comps, sometimes if there's enough wiggle room, you can say, well, we think the house will appraise for $210,000. So you mark up the sales price to build in those seller paid closing costs, but the house still has to appraise, and the agent should know if that's the case. And up front, that the buyer definitely needs the seller concessions to get to the end of the transaction. That is something that's important to be discussed up front from the beginning.
It's very well said. Stacy, I think you were going to talk to us about ARMs.
Yes, I was. Okay, an ARM is an adjustable rate mortgage, for those that might not know. It hasn't been around for several years because rates have been so low, and now as rates are going up, it's available. It's always been available, but now people are actually looking at this product. It's fixed. It's a fixed product for either 5, 7, or 10 years. There's a 3-year ARM, but usually it's 5, 7, or 10 years. It's fixed for that period of time. You can refinance it after the initial period of time. So if you lock it in on a 5-year ARM, after the 5 years, you can refinance at a lower rate. And at that point, if you do not refinance, it can possibly start adjusting. The initial adjustment on this product I'm looking at is 2%, and it could be up to 5% on the first initial, but at least be 2%. So you want to try to refinance if rates are down at that time, of course. But it is fixed. It's protected cap on it, so you're capping it at 5% total over the whole life of the loan on the adjustments. It's a conventional loan product. I don't know, do you have any questions about it?
No, so I'm gonna go backwards as a real estate professional and not on the finance side. So the ARMS guys are gonna give you a little bit better interest rate for purchase power. So the interest rates are going up, so the buyer's purchase power is going down. You do have to have very strong credit and a good down payment for the ARMS, so that they're not for everybody. They do get a bad rap, but they're more like relocation, short term, they're, 3, 5, 7 years, it's just in, out, kind of, and move on to someplace else. So they're good, they are a good product, but they get a bad reputation. And these two ladies will know what to do with it and set you up straight with an ARM if you needed that kind of a situation. Going back over to Leigh-Anne on the closing cost part, so I'm going to give you a couple different perspectives on that from a listing broker and a buyer's agent at the same time. So me as a listing broker, if I see an offer that comes in that's $200,000 with a buyer's incentive of $5,000, my sellers tend to kind of freak out because they've got all their normal real estate closing fees to sell their home, and then they get fussy about paying $5,000 of buyer's closing costs. And I will tell you guys, we've been doing these since COVID, okay? I've been telling people since COVID, buy houses, pay, do whatever. Interest rates back in COVID were 2.5%.
Yeah.
That was the time to buy, that was the dip in the market. It's going up, interest rates are gonna be expected to be what by the end of the year? What are they predicting?
We don't have a solid prediction yet, but as they've climbed in the last 90 days, we've seen anywhere from a point to 2 points. I think we're gonna be in the sevens.
See, I keep telling people 7 or 8 by the end of the year. So buyers, 7 or 8% interest rate hikes by the end of the year, that diminishes your buying power substantially. You've got a $200,000 house right now that you can afford, that will be $175,000 by the end of the year if that interest rate keeps going up. So it is important. I know it sounds like a sales pitch, but it is important to try to get your feet wet now while you can. Flip side to the sellers, when you see offers coming through with $5, $6, $7, $8, $10,000 in closing costs, that is an offer being presented to the seller. Do not flip out with your agent. Try to negotiate the cost. Not always is it going to be a $12,000 incentive that the lender can even use, okay? Sometimes, depending on the buyer's credit and credit worthiness, a lender can say, you're not gonna need that much, or we can even offer some kind of incentive sometime on the lender side. So when you see that in there and you see 5,000, counter it back. Just try to be open to a receptive offer, because our market is doing some funky things right now. If you're able to get an offer that's a really good offer with a good lender, with a good brokerage, try to work it out, try to work through it. Don't just focus on the money, because it could be good terms as well. So there's a lot of incentives to this, and we're seeing markets where houses are sitting on market longer days on market. Get creative. When you go into talk to your, when sellers are talking to listing agents and you interviewed 3 or 4 agents, and one agent says, hey, let's offer a closing cost incentive in the listing initially, your listing's gonna stand out. We haven't done that in 10 years. It's just a new marketing strategy that we're gonna start implementing here at the office anyway. So if anybody wants to steal that idea and use it for your sellers, I strongly recommend you do it. You're gonna start seeing more and more and more offers coming through with closing cost incentives for the buyer. So go with that.
It's also important, for the sake of expectation, to talk about, well, how much lower is the rate if I go with an ARM? What we're seeing, without much of a buy down discount point like we talked about, we're really seeing a difference in rate at about 1/2 to 3/4 of a point. It's not a huge amount, but if somebody's gonna be here for only 2 or 3 years, which we see that a lot here because of the oil field, that 1/2 to 3/4 of a point may make a big difference to them, especially in a higher price point. So we're seeing that. We're seeing lenders who are offering really low rates, but they're not fully explaining that buyers are paying for those rates.
Right.
Sometimes it doesn't make sense to pay thousands of dollars for 1/4 of a point. So you want to make sure, if you see that term discount point, what the difference is between your monthly payment if you don't pay a discount point.
Yeah.
And we see that in ARMS
Buyers
a lot.
ask. You need to ask, if you're comparing apples to apples, what are the full details of the terms? Because we have this happen all the time, even with my buyers. We'll get a buyer that'll go, well, I'm getting a better interest rate here. And I'm like, that's not even a real interest rate. That's like, it doesn't even exist in the market anymore. You've got to be buying buy down points. Oh, well, they didn't tell me that. I'm like, you better literally get it in writing on paper, because some of this stuff it's not evenly adjustable. Like, you're not comparing apples to apples. It's apples to bananas, or apples to chocolate chip cookie, or I don't know. It's just, you got to get the full detail of what it is that you're actually getting, not just, I clicked on this, they sent me the link, and it's online. No, it doesn't work that way.
And you see more of that difference between your online lenders versus your local lenders. The local lenders are very competitive with one another. We're pretty much within an eighth of a point to a quarter of a point of each other, and most of our local lenders explain that. But if you're online, or you think you're getting
That's
this
the problem.
amazing,
It's the online. The buyers want to have the power of being online at 2 o'clock in the morning, click, click, click. Okay, great, I've got a loan approved, instead of picking up the phone and calling a local lender and saying, hey, I had this doesn't make sense, I don't understand that. It's like, well, this is why. This is the whole reason why. And we've gotten to this, like, we can't communicate with each other anymore. It's all digital, which is great, but it's just an example. It's just to use as an example overall.
And while you're comparing, you need to go ahead and compare your cost of buying versus renting, which is something that Leigh-Anne and Stacy can talk to us about as well.
Yeah, so we kind of put together, this is based on a national average, but I can give an example of a local scenario. So basically, if you're paying around $1,500 a month in rent, realistically, you should be shopping in the price range of around $218,000 to $230,000. That gives you a monthly payment of roughly $14.99. That's principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, so that's all inclusive.
That's great.
You remember, if you pay $1,500 a month in rent to your landlord, you're paying 100% interest on that $1,500. Where if you purchase, you're paying that same $1,500 towards something that you own. If you pay $1,650 in rent, you're looking at shopping around $240,000 or $250,000. $1,700, $247,000, $1,900, roughly $278,000. I have a buyer right now that's paying $2,550 in rent here in Midland, and we all know rental in Midland is very high. And this is for a house, and there are apartments that are in the 2000s too. But this buyer's paying $2,550 a month in rental, and they're buying a $349,000 house, and their monthly payment is almost $2,400 a month. Because of the property they picked, the taxes and insurance, it just worked out to be pretty comparable to what they're already paying, and they're shopping up to $350,000. So that's just kind of a general scenario. And of course, any scenario that comes up with dollars, we can always run a worksheet on what it looks like with today's rate and compare the two.
And Chris was going to tell us about the local
Right.
Midland rental
So
prices.
yeah, so typically it was that 1%. So if it's a $300,000 home that I own, then I'm going to be charging probably anywhere between $3,000 and $3,200 a month in rent, and that's a going rate around here. If you go to outside cities, you're going to be looking at a $300,000 house that may be around $2,100 to $2,200. So it just depends. But in this particular area, it seems like Leigh-Anne said, the rents are higher here. So if this scenario of this $1,500 a month person is buying a $215,000 house, that person is either giving 100% of the equity to the landlord versus me having some equity position in 2 years. And then after a 2-year period, you're probably looking at a 220 house is probably going to go 250, 260, maybe 270, depending on where they purchased. But if they're there for at least 2 years and they're married, you can get a tax-free exemption up to $250,000. Or married exemption is $500,000. Single is $250,000 exemption. That's tax-free money growth in a 2-year period. You cannot beat that. So even though people are intimidated with these new interest rates that are coming in, it's still not a bad time to invest. And if you've got a dip in the market for selling and you've got interest rates going up, you've got this little sweet spot right in the middle where you could actually build some equity in another 2-year period that would be tax-free. So keep it in mind, guys, you really do. Great lenders, great broker, and we got Savannah. Hey!
Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us, and thank you guys for watching.
Thank you.